get started.
This conference will now be recorded.
It's right 12 noon. So I want to welcome everyone today. I'm Marie Mold, and I am the Manager of Stakeholder Engagement here at Electricity Human Resources Canada, or EHRC. I want to thank you for joining our webinar today, which is COVID-19, Navigating Canada's Employer Relief. The federal government, as well as Canadian financial institutions, have been rolling out all of these multiple assistance programs as part of their COVID-19 economic response plan. In this webinar today, we will look at 3 different measures and provide details to help explain what this all means for the employer. The 3 topics we will cover in the next 30 minutes are the temporary 10% wage subsidy for employers, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, and the Canada Emergency Business Account. So before we get started, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping notes. We will be recording this webinar and posting it on our website and on YouTube. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation, so please feel free to type in your questions at any stage during the presentation, and we will queue them up. For those of you who don't know EHRC, it is a national not-for-profit organization supporting the human resources needs of the Canadian electricity sector. Sorry, I just lost my my place here. Trying to decipher and understand the multiple relief programs that are available while working to keep the lights on can be taxing during this disconcerting time. We are here to support you and the industry today by providing clarity as we navigate through the expansive details of the various programs. Now I am very delighted to introduce our presenter. Sandy Tunwell is the founder and managing consultant of Account Train Inc., which in 2018 celebrated 25 years of providing all things accounting to varying companies, including dozens of not-for-profit organizations. Sandy has combined her vast knowledge of accounting with her social skills to develop a unique approach to bookkeeping and accounting, which has been recognized by many clients. Sandy is also EHRC's controller, and we can attest to Sandy's social and relationship skills, including her love of board games. So I want to welcome Sandy. And Sandy, I'm going to now hand it over to you.
Thank you, Marie. Hello, everyone. I wanted to add my presentation is following information provided by the government and affiliated funders. Every company is different, so if you have any questions or need any clarification, go to your professional accounting team for further assistance. So with that, Marie, if you want to start with the first slide. Hello?
Yes, I'm there. Can everybody see the screen?
No.
Oh, you know? Okay, I'm sorry. There we go.
Perfect.
My apologies.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So like Marie said, there were 3 programs that we're going to review this morning. The first one is called the Temporary Wage Subsidy Program. And the reason it's called temporary is because there is a bigger wage subsidy program that rolled out just last week. So you're allowed to apply for one or the other. And don't worry about it if you've started with the temporary one and want to switch over. When you're filling out the paperwork for the second one, it allows for a line item to deduct anything you've already applied for with this first one I'm about to speak about. So as the slide says, this is a 10% wage subsidy to help small business with their payroll requirements. Subsidy benefit is purely for the employer to have extra cash flow. Therefore, the employee's paycheck won't change. The employee will still be responsible to pay their income tax, their CPP, and their EI. Again, this is just an incentive for the employer based on income tax calculations. Next slide, please. So it is available now, and it's very easy to apply for. It covers from March 18th for 3 months, ending June 18th. So what you need to do is take those dates and calculate how much is your incentive, which I'll talk about later, and you will be applying for it yourself via your next payroll remittance, whether that's done on your own or if you have a payroll provider like Ceridian. Next slide, please. All businesses qualify. Basically, this lists whether you're a corporation, a sole proprietor, a partnership, a not-for-profit. What wouldn't qualify would be something like a hobby business or a business that does not have an actual account with the government. A business number would be provided if you have an account with the government. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned a moment ago, there is no application process. It's up to you to apply. And I'm going to run through an example. Let's say you have an employee that their gross wages are $1,000. And it's important to pay attention to how much income tax you took off their payroll. So let's just say it's $300. I won't talk about the CPP and EI because it doesn't affect this example. So what would happen is you would take 10% of the gross wages of $1,000 that I just mentioned. So that's $100. As long as that $100 is less than the income tax that was removed, which I just mentioned was $300, it automatically qualifies. So what you want to do with that is, if this was your only employee, to make the example simple, you would be submitting not the $300 tax that you took off, but $200 for tax. That extra $100 becomes a revenue for you. And when recording it, that's what you'll want to do. You'll want to set up a special COVID rebate account, whether you put that as a revenue or as a negative expense under your salary expense accounts. Either is fine. It is going to affect your bottom line. It is going to reduce your expenses by $100. So there are limitations. The limitations for the 3-month period is $1,375 per employee. So the example I gave, it was just $100 for that specific employee. So you may have 10 employees, you may have several employees, but the limit is $1,375 per person, and as well a $25,000 max for the employer. So you'd want to keep track of how much you are removing from everybody per pay, and then you will see when you reach the $25K. And for small business, you may not reach that, but that is the cap, $25,000. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are 2 wage subsidy programs, and this is the second one. It's called the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. It's a much higher value. It's actually 75% of the employee's gross pay, and it's based on the 12-week period starting March 15th. So 12 weeks, March 15th takes you to June 6th. This incentive is for employees that are actually being paid, but not necessarily working. If they're working while your office or company is closed from a home office or what have you, you are only eligible for the 75% wage subsidy. However, if you are paying your employees and they're not doing any work during this closed time, you are eligible for a second incentive with this program. And it's the third bullet, which talks about you are eligible to get 100% refund of the CPP and EI portions of the payroll deductions. Next slide, please. The funding will be through 3 ways online to be eligible. You must apply online. There is a predetermined form you must fill out. There are several line items to fill out, but if you just pay attention to one at a time, they're very self-explanatory. As I mentioned a moment ago when talking about the temporary wage subsidy, there is actually a line that's going to ask if you've already applied for that program, and if so, they will deduct it from your total with this program. There's also going to be an area to put in the CPP and EI amounts that I just mentioned that you are eligible to get 100% back on if the employees are actually not working. You might have a combo of employees that are working and not working, so you might want to keep a spreadsheet to separate everything properly, and you might need help with that. We've designed something, and I'm sure that your accounting team can do the same thing. Next slide, please. So as you can see, most types of firms are eligible. Corporations, not-for-profits, sole proprietors, and partnerships. There are some other eligibility components that you must be aware of, though. One of them is there's two different ways to see if you qualify. The first one is your revenue for this March 2020 must have been less by 15% compared to March of 2019. For April and May, less by 15%. For April and May, it must be 30%. So if you compare April 2020 to April 2019, the revenue must be 30% less in order for you to qualify. So you will be applying for this 1 month at a time because the circumstances can change. And I'll use myself personally for Account Train Inc. We will qualify for March. However, I don't expect that we will qualify for April and May because accounting is deemed essential and we have a lot of audits April and May. So I don't think our revenues will decrease up to 30%. The other item that they want you to realize, and that's the third bullet, is some people don't want to compare to last year because last year might have been a fluke, or perhaps you weren't even open last March, April, and May. Maybe you started your business anytime after those months. If that's the case, you're allowed to take the average of January and February of this year. So if you take, let's say your income was $20,000 for January and $30,000 for February, that's $50,000. It's telling you to take the average. The average for those 2 months would be divided by 2, so it would be $25,000. So that would be the matrix value that you're using if you want to go that route. Next slide, please. So it's not driven by how many people you have on your payroll or the dollar value of your payroll. It does have some limitations, and the limitations are it's $847 per person per pay. So what you'll want to do, again, when I talked about the spreadsheet in a couple of slides ago, you'll want to have the information for employees that make less than that in one column. And anybody that makes more than that, you're going to want to max their salary out at the $847 per week so that you're making sure you're not overstating the claim. As the title states, it's a 75% wage subsidy. That means the government will be refunding you 75%. This is to assist you in paying your employees. Some of you may choose to pay your employees 75% so that it's not costing you anything extra so that you can continue your business as usual. However, for those of you that are taking advantage of this program and you can afford to pay the difference, the 25%, the government is asking that you do so. The second bullet from the bottom I'm going to read because it's extremely important. Although it is not mandatory for businesses to pay the remaining 25% of the wage, it must be attested that every effort was made to do so. So this has been the biggest question I've been asked because some people are in the position of they might have the money now, but they're worried about how long this is going to last and if they will have that 25% down the road. So that's something you should be discussing again with your professional team, accounting team, because those are very important decisions that must be made. My suggestion is if you are sitting on the fence, you're really not sure, you might want to hold back on the 25% for now. Make an arrangement with the staff that you're going to be paying them 75%. It's certainly better than zero. They might be very happy with that. You might make a further suggestion that if things shape up quicker than you think or circumstances aren't so dear for you, you might want to track the 25% that's owed to each employee and perhaps pay them at a later date if you could do so. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thanks. So again, the calculations, like I mentioned, is you're going to be comparing whether it's to last year, same month, or you're going to be doing average for January and February. For not-for-profits, the good news is these calculations do not include monies you are getting from funders. So many of my not-for-profit clients are funded by several government departments. You do not have to include their monies for that calculation. So what you would be basing it on perhaps are membership fees, fees that you get for sponsorships, and for event sales. A very important bullet next is talking about how you calculate your revenue. So you may not be aware that there are two ways to track accounting, and although the accrual basis is the law in Canada, a lot of people do use the cash basis. So first of all, determine what practice you're following. And the biggest thing they just want to pay attention to for this program is that you are consistent. If you're using the cash basis method to do your calculations, then do so for all 3 months. If you're using the accrual method to do your calculations, then be consistent and do so for the 3 months. Do not mix them up. Any questions about that, again, refer to a professional so that they can explain the differences to you. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, it's based on 75% of the gross pay with a maximum of $847 per employee per week. So you might have difficulty calculating that. What I suggest you do, for those of you that are paying your employees monthly or bi-weekly, semi-monthly, whatever your payroll period is, just take the gross salary for the year. So if somebody's making $50,000 or $75,000 a year, just divide it by 52 weeks. Whether that's how you pay them or not, you can right away get their weekly amount to determine if it's above or below the 847 limit. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, as I was discussing some of the other slides, it's based on 100% of the gross pay. The employer is still responsible for paying CPP and EI. There are no maximums other than the 847. There is no limit per company. And if you do own more than one company, you certainly are allowed to apply for each company. Some people might be confused by employees not working versus employees working. It's pretty straightforward. If the employee is doing any work at all, whether it's at your location or from a home office or off-site, they are deemed employee working, and therefore you would not qualify for the 100% CPP and EI incentive I spoke about. However, if they're doing any work whatsoever, if they're not doing any work at all, then they would apply. So zero work would qualify you for the other incentive. Next slide, please. So there are actually 3 ways to apply, but they're all online and they're all through the same window. And once you get inside the CRA website, it's at the top, you'll see it in yellow, it stands out, it'll say Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. You drill into that line item and you're going to see immediately that there's 3 ways to apply. It can be yourself, if you're allowed to. It can be a representative, someone like myself, a controller or bookkeeper for your company. There are many options, so choose the one that makes the most sense for you. Now, to be honest, there have been challenges with this process. If you are having any issues, please call CRA at 1-800-959-5525. It will be busy, so I always recommend when you're phoning CRA in these busy times to be doing something else, have them on speakerphone, so that if you're having to wait 30 to 60 minutes, you're busying yourself with something else. As I mentioned earlier, once you apply for 1 month, the first period covers March 15th to April 4th to April 11th. For the next period that starts April 12th, you do not automatically qualify. It's based on your revenues, and each month should be looked at individually. So you must reapply every month. Next slide, please. So the last subsidy I'd like to speak about is a little bit different because it's not actually with the government. It's with Export Development Canada. And that's why you're actually going to be applying through your bank. This is to cover operating costs like payroll, rent, utilities, and property taxes, etc. And it's to help in these trying times. The key items about this is it will be treated as a loan. So what will happen is once you apply through your bank, you will see within 5 business days that $40,000 has been set up in a line of credit that may show up like a separate credit card account. It will sit there until you access it. It literally will just sit as an allowance for you. Think of it like a Visa card where you have a limit, but if you're not using it, it's just sitting there until you want to use it. As soon as you start to use it, what that would look like is you would transfer funds from the line of credit to your bank account. And you are able to use this right up until December 2022. There are no fees, there's no interest, there's no principal payments you have to make against what you've used. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this will be through your bank. So you must have a business account that has been opened before March 1st, 2020. If you're a very small business and you're not using a business account, you are using your personal account, you automatically do not qualify. There are no exceptions to the rules. I've been in contact with some of the key banks, speaking to them about some of the exceptions that they must be hearing about, and they've had to put limits, otherwise they would be inundated with, but what about this, what about that? So if you don't qualify based on the few requirements, then it's not the program for you. Next slide, please. So just an FYI, initially the eligibility was if your T4 for 2019 showed a total payroll paid between $50,000 and $1 million. This is the only adjustment that they've made to this program to help with some of these calls and inquiries they were getting. So they've upped it, and now the limit is based on $20,000 to $1.5 million. So if you look at your T4 summary for 2019, box 14 will show how much you paid out to all of your employees. The only number they want to see is that total. That's all they're asking for. It is a little confusing because it's based on payroll. It's got nothing to do with payroll. The first 2 programs we spoke about are payroll driven and based on payroll numbers. This, however, was the number that they used to determine if you qualify, but that's all it has to do with payroll. This money can be used for anything you'd like for operating costs. A business account is required, like I mentioned. Unfortunately, no personal accounts, and as long as they were open before March 1st. So there's no retroactive, you can't open one now and start from now. And you are allowed to apply per company. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the application is through your bank, and that's been open for some time now. I highly recommend that even if you feel you may or may not need it, you should apply for it now. The government only has so many dollars slotted for this program, so they will run out. They had over 10,000 applications in the first day. So please, if you think you qualify, go through the process now. It's quite easy. You'll see on your bank account there's a big COVID button, and you just press it, and it's only asking you the 3 questions that are the last bullet on this slide. It's going to ask you your business number. Just in case you don't realize, the business number is the 9 digits you are provided as soon as you open your business with the government. The letters at the end are for which program in the government. So the RP is payroll. Just the sideline, the RT is GST, and RC is corporate tax. You may or may not have all of those accounts for your company, but for this situation, you must have the payroll business account. So it will be your 9-digit business account, RP000, and for most of you, the X will be a 1. And they're asking for box 14, as I mentioned earlier, from your T4 summary from 2019. If you don't have that readily available, you should be able to get that from either Ceridian or whoever does your payroll service, or there are payroll totals available through your accountant as well as through CRA. CRA will have your T4 summary information in their records, and you can phone and ask for this number if you don't have it. And that is, of course, if you're a representative and are allowed to speak to CRA. And the last thing they're going to ask is obviously the total. So you're going to need the total from, as I mentioned, the total is from line 2, and there you have to be able to make available the proof if they ask. They're not asking you to send anything at this time. They're just asking you merely for your account number and your total, but they are asking that you have that paperwork available if they do ask for proof. Next slide, please. These funds are restricted for operating costs only. So for things like your rent and insurance, office supplies, whatever it takes to run your business, a day-to-day operating costs. This is not for things like paying arrears of monies you owe to CRA or a debt you may have from the past with funders. This is to help you continue and maintain your business through this COVID crisis. Next slide, please. Terms are actually very exciting. As I mentioned, there is no interest. The interest does not start until December 31st, 2022. And that is if you aren't able to pay it back. If you can pay it back at that time, you actually are given a grant. If you can pay back $30,000 by December 31st, 2022, that's all you have to do, and the file will be closed, and you get to keep that $10,000 as a grant. So at that time, you could transfer $10,000 into your account, keep it, and record it in your books as revenue. There is no monthly principal amount. So like other loans that ask you to pay a portion every month, there are no payments needed, again, until December 31st, 2022. There will be no fees for this loan grant until the same time frame. So there's nothing that needs to be done other than you just use it as needed and try to pay it off by December 31st, 2022. If you can't pay it off by then, it turns into a loan. You have 2 years to pay it off at the rate of 5% per year interest on the balance you have at that time. Next slide, please. Before I start with the questions, I just want to add that there is another government-funded program that's coming out. It's rolling out soon. They've been updating through eBlast, but it hasn't actually started yet. I want to mention it because it's a little bit different. It's called the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And why it's a little bit different is because this program is for landlords. So if you're renting from a landlord, it will be up to them if they choose to take on this incentive. If they do, the intention is that they have to pass it on to you. Some landlords will choose not to take it because there is criteria for them that won't make it easy. there are things that they will have to follow that won't benefit them in some situations. So if I were you, when it is announced, please reach out to your landlords, because every situation is going to be different. What the government has suggested is if they choose not to take the program, that they offer something else in lieu of. So don't be shy to reach out and ask your landlord what they have in mind for rent. And by the way, it's for 3 months. It's a 3-month program. So you should be having some kind of reduction in your commercial rent for 3 months of 2020. I'm open for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Sandy. So if anybody has any questions, make sure you queue them up. You'll see the little comment icon on your screen. Submit your questions and I'll read them out loud. I will start off with one question that I have, Sandy. So I hear there's a lot of confusion on how to apply to these programs. Can you provide us with some insight on how to apply to the different programs?
Sure, it is confusing for sure. I'll go backwards. I'll reiterate what I just said about the Canada Emergency business account. People are confused about this because although it was announced by the government, it's not the government that's funding this. It is an arrangement through each and everyone's business bank. So if you're dealing with the RBC or Bank of Montreal, whatever your bank is, that's who is going to be your provider. So you would have to go through your business portal and apply online on your business account. It's very easy. There's a large COVID with the RBC. I noticed there's a large green button right on the home screen. And as I mentioned as well, there's only a couple of questions you have to answer. You have to have your payroll information available from 2019. And then what's going to happen is they're going to send you a notice within 5 business days to say if you've qualified or not. I have not heard of very many situations that haven't qualified. If your T4 total for 2019 was between 20,000 and 1.5 million, you automatically qualify as long as your business number that you've remitted matches their system. And then what you'll see is that your bank account, your banking information that you usually look at, checking account, savings, credit cards, you're going to see a new one, and it's going to show a balance of 40K, and you would just use it as needed. So that one's a little bit different because it's through your bank. The easiest one of the payrolls is the first one, the temporary wage subsidy. That is done either by yourself or your payroll service. If you have a payroll service like Ceridian or ADP, one of the payroll services available in Canada, there is an extra page when you're processing your payroll. And it, again, stands out quite noticeably. And it's very simple because it's populating for you your gross pay for that payroll run and 10%. And then it's just confirming that 10% that you're eligible for is not over how much tax came off. And if that's the case, it will automatically do the math. And what that will look like is the remittance that is sent to CRA and how much therefore comes out of your bank account for that payroll run will decrease by that value. So that would be done by your payroll service. Now, if you do payroll in-house, that must be done by whoever processes your payroll. They will have to take that extra step when they're calculating how much tax, CPP, and EI is due to CRA on the 15th of the following month. So, for example, for your March payrolls, they are due April 15th. And when that is processed, then or prior to April 15th, the person calculating it would just merely take off that 10% and remit less to CRA. So that's done in-house or through the payroll service. The last one, Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, is the most complex for 2 reasons. A, you must do it yourself. It can only be done online, and it's quite complex because there's several lines that you must fill out. But like I said before, It seems overwhelming or perhaps intimidating, but just fill out one line at a time. They're very well explained. They even have little extra side bullets to further explain if you're still not sure. But nowadays, you can get assistance from one of your professionals or even from CRA if you don't have an accounting pro to take your questions to. So 3 different programs, 3 very different ways to apply. Thank you, Marie.
Great. I have another question here. And thank you for giving us more information about some of the new programs that are coming up. In addition to those new programs, are you aware of any others that'll be announced in the near future?
Actually, I'm not at this time. For those of you that have a company that's getting their taxes done by an outside firm, which is usually the case, they should be on top of all of those things. I have several CPA firms that I'm involved with and have colleagues. So I see that many of them are sending out weekly updates and information bulletins. So make sure that you're on their email list. And if you're not receiving anything like that, then reach out and get that information. As well, you can be Googling CRA, and if you just Google CRA, you're going to notice that Canada Revenue Agency's front page has all the COVID programs listed right at the top. They're in yellow, they're very obviously, and they're all there. And if you drill into any of them, it'll explain how they work and if you're eligible.
Okay. One more question here. So now that these programs have been released, have you been hearing in the industry of any challenges or concerns around these programs?
My concern, as I mentioned, is that I would apply for them sooner than later. There's only so much money allotted to each program. Although the funds are high and it will take some time, I still say if you know you want to apply, then get moving and get help if you need so that you can get these things rolled out. The other thing I want to mention is that the most complex, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the 75% one, there have been challenges with applying. People are getting online and they're getting only to a certain point and they're not able to move forward. They might be getting asked for a web access code for starters. If that's something you're being asked for and it's the only one of the 3 options that you can choose, then you're going to have to phone CRA. And I'll give the number again, 1-800-959-5525. And that would be, you'll have to phone them to get that access code. Other challenges people are having with the same program is they're just having difficulty understanding what's needed, how they fill out the form. CRA has actually designed a spreadsheet for assisting you to get the proper calculations. Again, it might be overwhelming and it might just be easier if you built your own spreadsheet based on the criteria that pertains to you. As I mentioned at the very beginning, every company is different. And what CRA has to do when they design a spreadsheet is make it so that it's got everything possibly that they could think of for each and every client or company that would apply. So the challenges will be with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy program the most, just because there's more to it. There's a lot more money at stake. So don't be shy to ask for help. And if you don't have a professional accounting firm or accountant in-house, then make sure that you're not shy to hire somebody to help you do those types of tasks, because it's well worth the investment.
Okay, that's wonderful. Really, really good advice there today. Thank you so much, Sandy. So I would like to thank Sandy today and all of the participants. We will be sending out a very quick poll later today requesting topics that you'd be interested in seeing in future webinars. If you'd like more information on Sandy and her team at Account Train Inc., you can visit our website at accounttrain.com. And you can stay informed about future webinars with EHRC and resources by signing up for our newsletter on electricityhr.ca. Our next webinar will focus on mental health and Hydro Ottawa's experience during COVID-19 on May the 27th. And you don't want to miss this one. Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone, and I hope you will join us soon. Take good care.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.